Thank you very much, Ellie, for that bit of rabble-rousing there. I love a bit of educate, agitate and organise myself. We are now going to hear from Piers Telemacque, who is NUS Vice-president of Society and Citizenship, if I've got that right. Yes.
Okay. You're right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of young people and the potential power that we have on the lead up to the general election if we actually get young people mobilised and organised. Young people, I'd say definitely in the past 5 years, but for a very long time I've had a pretty raw deal, getting screwed over left, right and centre by cuts. And the reason young people seem to be bearing the brunt for a lot of the cuts is because it's less politically damaging to do it towards young people who don't vote, who don't turn out. And we see it nationally, we see it locally. So we're talking for a few minutes about what happened in Bradford. Bradford's got, in 2020, is going to have the youngest population of young people in Europe. Over 50% of young people are going to be under 25 in Bradford. So we've got a lot of young people. Yet Bradford Council decided that when the national government cuts came in and the local councils had to cut the budgets, Bradford Council decided that the one disproportionate cut, the one cut above 20%, they were going to give one a cut to the youth service of 80%, a service that engages with over 30,000 people across the district, yet they thought that that would be one of the best places to make cuts. And when we'd found out about the cuts, the youth workers were in such a difficult position because all their lives, a youth service is, just to clarify, just in case people don't know, it's a service that engages with people aged 13 to 19 and up to 25 if we've got a disability, doing anything from outdoor pursuits to giving a safe place to go on at night time, somebody to talk to, be actors, social workers, role models, parents, and everything to some of these kids who don't have nothing. And Bradford Council wanted to cut that. And the youth workers, all their life have been providing support for young people and empowering them to create the changes that they want to see happen. Yet the youth workers were basically gagged by the council. They knew that if this 80% cuts went through, out of 110 youth workers, there'd be 10 youth workers left, 2 per parliamentary constituency, the bare minimum. So they thought, the council basically put pressure by saying, if you're the ones who are rabbling up these young people, you're definitely not going to end up with a job. So the youth workers were in an awful position where they kind of knew something horrible was going to happen, jobs were at stake, but also the young people, like the reality for these young people if the youth service went, it would just be diabolical. And they kind of had to leave it to the kids, so they basically explained the situation to young people. And the way I explain my engagement with youth services, it has literally transformed my life, like the levels of engagement, the opportunities, the doors it opened, like leading me from being a kid who's never been interested in politics to Vice-president of National Union of Students. And the way I put it is that I've not come from a massively disadvantaged background. My parents are still together. Yeah, I've come from a deprived area, but compared to some of the kids in Bradford who the youth service engaged with, my life's been full of roses. And the way I think is, if it's transformed my life so much, think about the kids who've got absolutely nothing in this country. What is the impact on them going to be? So when we found out about the cuts, we mobilised straight away. At Bradford College we offer, because to be a youth worker it's a qualified profession, and we offer a youth development degree. So we found out on the Sunday about the cuts, because they tried to do it sneakily so we could get their exec meeting in on the Tuesday. So we had Monday to organise, and we managed to get about 60 people to go down to City Hall, young people and a lot of youth and community development students. We even pulled about 10 young lads from outside Dixie's Chicken who were just chilling on the dinner. He goes, oh, what's going on here? Well, literally just walking down and like, yo, what's going on here? Says, oh, we have to demonstrate against cuts. And he's like, what's a demonstrate? I said, it's a demonstration. And I explained. He goes, what about? I goes, youth service. He goes, oh, fuck. Sorry. I went, oh, effing hell. They've helped me loads. I'm coming down with you. So off the march, man, chomping away on the chicken, not waiting out the City Hall. We've got City Hall and they're like, you can't come in. And I says, come on, it's a public meeting, we can come in. And the security guard goes, oh, I'll go check. He come back, he goes, no, you definitely can't come in. I says, oh, we want to speak to somebody because we know we can. He said, I'll be back in 2 minutes. 3 minutes passed. He says, come, let's just run in. Once we get in, they can't stop us. And they're like, no, we can't do that. And the photographer from local paper goes, go on, do it, it'll get sorted. So we're all running now. We've just sat in this council meeting and the council didn't know what to do because we'd all come with like, we've got like printing presses at college, so in a space of a day we had 100 t-shirts turned out with logos and stuff and banners and everything. And we've got there, And I'm explaining to these young lads like what the process is, what the purpose of today's meeting, and why the cuts are going through. And this lad started telling me his story, and I've got up and I'm speaking to council and I'm running out of stuff to say. So I said, I found my man on the street walking down. Do you want to get up, Jordan, and tell him what he told me? So this little lad stood up like he's never spoken public before, but he spoke in front of a full council chamber, and he talked about how he was suffering physical and mental abuse from his mum's partner, both him and his mum, how the partner was on drugs and drink, and he'd ended up getting onto it because it was readily available in the house, how he was getting kicked out of school, getting in trouble with the police, and then his friend took him to the local youth centre, and the youth workers kind of got to know this young lad, spotted the warning problems, got social services involved, got the certain voluntary organisations to help him with the drugs and alcohol, etc. This guy got arrested, and he goes, and literally, me and my mum are happy, we're safe, we're free, with this and with that. And he goes, it wouldn't have been, if it weren't for these youth workers, the school didn't pick up on it. Do you know what I mean? None of the organisations and services who should have picked up on it, they didn't pick up on it. And he says, my life would have been ruined, I would have been in prison now. They've even managed to get me to Bradford College and got him financial help to get his rigger boots to do his construction course. And these councillors looked like they were going to cry. And I said, this is life for kids in Bradford, and this is the service you are taking away from them. They wanted to cut it by 80% for a £4 million budget. And anyways, over the course of the next 5 months, we basically showed them that young people are political, young people do have the power to mobilise, and if you take something that's really personal and really special to them, they will resist. We had demonstrations which were about 800 people strong outside the city hall when one of the council meetings were going on. We did campaigns where we'd got young people to hold up signs saying, because of Bradford Youth Service, and then they'd write a sentence like, it got me into university, or it stopped the abuse at home. We got hundreds of them, and we chose the 91 best ones, printed them all out, and then won at council meetings, because bear in mind we've had like 5 months or 5 council meetings in between this. We went and put a different message, a different printout with a different kid, with a different message, different story on each of the councillors' seats, so that when they went to sit their asses down, they had to look at what we were taking away from these kids. We had Christmas card campaigns, we got 1,000 of them in, and it said, all up for Christmas is my youth service, and there was some, we read through some of them because we wanted to get some good ones for the press, and some of them were like really, really explicit, and we poured right out in these cards, like the level of ones we'd heard about sexual abuse. And with what's been going on in Rotherham, we're reading the document which are basically saying youth workers were systematically ignored. Youth workers were the one who spotted what was going on in Rotherham, because these kids didn't feel like they could talk to certain organisations, didn't feel like they could talk to parents about it, but they talked to youth workers and they was ignored. But we did loads, and young people, we did it in a way that was accessible for them. So instead of saying, you've got to sign this petition, you've got to do X, Y and Z, they were coming up, they were using materials that were readily available in their youth centres to come up with all different kind of campaigning techniques. We held question times with the 4 MPs in Bradford. All of the 4 MPs, including the Labour MP, it's the Labour Council, came out against, and we were at that time. Cool. But basically, the council pulled a few dodgy tricks. They told young people, said, you need to fill in the public consultation forms. You need to go through it that way. There's no point doing all this loud stuff because it's not going to make a difference. We got 4,000 of them filled in. Leader of the council, cheeky, he went to his group meeting and told them we only had 500 and something in. Only told them about the online ones. So we found out, and he said, basically, I rung him. He said, well, there's nothing you can do about it. That's what's being said, and the decision is being based on the fact that these councils, despite saying fill in the public consultation forms, still only thought you guys got 500 in. So I said, cool. So I'm coming around the photocopies in tomorrow. My mum, he didn't know what to say. Like, would you like to come speak to me about this? I was like, no. I rung our local paper straight away, and just saying it undermines the whole consultation process, because not only had they lied, saying they got 500 when there were 4,000 and we had photocopies to prove it. All the other residents of Bradford who filled in consultations about what were important to them, clearly not being listened to. But the result of that, like, young people got organised, young people got a win. We managed to get them down to 36%, which was still disproportionate, but it was better than the 80%. But the one thing that came from that were young people were raring to go. They got to learn about political structures, about what councillors did, how they got involved, how to become an MP. And as a result of that, Bradford Council will think twice before they go and try and shit on young people. That's essentially what we were going to do. But if we can replicate that across the country, if we can get young people organised and mobilised in a way that's accessible to them, then the power would be amazing, and maybe some of the political parties will start putting forward policy promises to young people, But as part of my, so I'm finishing now, as part of my role this year, I'm going to be campaigning for youth services to be funded as a statutory service, so they've got to be there by law, and political and citizenship education on the curriculum, because there's no point, if I come out of school without being able to read and write, they're like always being failed by the system. Our kids end up coming out without knowing the difference between left and right, the importance of voting, why to vote, the principles of the Free Main Party. So
Thanks
we need,
very much.
yeah, cool. But yeah, so youth
Brilliant. And now I'm delighted to ask Fiona Edwards from the Students' Assembly to give her a contribution to our discussion this afternoon.
Well, first of all, it's not going to be as good as the last speech, so
We've all got different elements to add in. It's a wide area.
So thanks very much for inviting me here today to speak at this really important Fringe about how we're going to get a new generation organised and unionised so we can fight back against austerity. I'm here to bring solidarity greetings from the Student Assembly Against Austerity, which is the student wing of the People's Assembly, which recently we celebrated our first birthday with a 50,000 strong national demonstration in London, which many people I'm sure in the room were there. It was fantastic. We united together trade unions, students, young and old, disabled people, women, black people, LGBT, everyone together, united against what this disgraceful government is doing to destroy our society. And the Student Assembly Against Austerity, basically our mission is to unite all students into a movement against austerity that's active and fights basically for an end to austerity and for equality and social justice. So what I want to talk about today is just three different things. Firstly, it's been discussed quite a lot already, but the attacks we're facing, the role of unions, and then the role of students, and how we kind of all unite these sort of movements together to make a difference. So basically there's plenty of things that we need to be getting organised about to confront and get active. So, you know, from stopping the cuts and privatisation to our NHS, demanding jobs for the more than 800,000 young people that are currently unemployed, making poverty history with an end to loan sharks and food banks. I mean, how ridiculous is it that in one of the richest countries in the world, people are having to rely on food banks to feed themselves? And we have to fight for, you know, and for the young people that are lucky enough to find work, it's a world of unpaid internships, 0-hour contracts, and a minimum wage which barely meets the rising cost of living crisis. And alongside that, we've got our politicians trying to say the reason that you're in this situation isn't because of our austerity problems, our austerity policies, it's because of immigration, which is just pure racist scapegoating. It's designed to divide and rule, and if we give an inch to that, then, you know, it's game over. We're not going to defeat this government. So this is basically what austerity for Britain is already like, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. The Tories want permanent austerity, and the Labour Party, unfortunately at the moment, are committed to the Tory spending plans if they win the next general election. So we've got austerity for a long, long time unless we build a movement to fight for an alternative, and that's exactly what we've got to do. And unions are going to be at the absolute heart of building this movement against austerity. Currently, there are 7 million people in the UK that are in a trade union. I think it's really fantastic that the Young Greens are rising to the challenge of our generation, which is to get this generation unionised and organised. That's what we've got to do. We've got to recruit young people to trade unions, because it's one of the most powerful weapons we've got to fight back. I'd like to just point out, you know, many students are workers as well, because basically rising student debt and lack of, you know, finance from the government means that most students, unless they're fortunate to get a lot of money from their parents, are forced to take part in part-time work just to make ends meet, just to pay the bills, etc. It's very important that we organise these students. But for students that aren't even lucky enough to find a part-time job, because that can be quite difficult, and non-students as well, you know, we need to unionise these people too, and it's really fantastic that the Unite Community is a new initiative which has been initiated by Unite the Union, the biggest union in Europe, to organise people who aren't in work, which is very, very important. As we know, like, you know, millions of people basically without work at the moment, and these people need to be part of the movement too. And I just think Romayne really touched on it at the beginning, but the power of a trade union has really been shown this year by what the National Union of Teachers has done in its campaign Stand Up for Education, forcing a Tory minister, Michael Gove, to go, probably the most unpopular Tory minister that there is, thanks to the NUT, and did get a pay rise as well, had a massive campaign for a pay rise. It's not as much as teachers deserve, but they fought, they struck, they protested, and they did win, and I think we need to celebrate the victories that we do get, because otherwise, how are we ever going to get out of bed in the morning and get back on that picket line, to be honest? So I just want to now move on to students. As I said before, there are 7 million trade unionists, 7 million people who are in a trade union in this country, but it might surprise you to learn that there are 7 million students in this country as well. So if you add those two together, I know there might be a bit of overlap, but let's ignore that for a minute, then you've got 14 million people. Weld that together, and that is a force to be reckoned with, and that's what we need to do. We need to really properly organise the student movement into a force which wants to fight and is allied to the trade union movement, because then we really can give these Tories a bit of a run for their money. So what is the Student Assembly Against Austerity doing to get organised over the next period of time? Well, first of all, I just want to give a bit of a story about how campaigning does work, just like Piers was talking about. The Student Assembly Against Austerity launched 10 months ago, and our first major campaign was to stop the government selling off student loans to private companies, which they plan to do before the general election. So, in response to this, we got organised. We did national days of action, national weeks of action involving over 50 campuses. We protested outside the government department responsible for privatising student loans. And thanks to the campaigning of hundreds of grassroots activists, we got 76 MPs in Parliament to sign an early day motion opposing the sell-off, even though none of the major parties had committed to that policy. And all of this actually was done, by the Student Assembly Against Austerity in alliance with lots of different groups in the student movement, and the Young Greens played a really crucial part in that on campuses across the country. And we won. We got the government to back down because of all this months of campaigning. So that's one victory. But unfortunately, we've got many, many, many battles ahead, and that is just one, small but significant attack in a whole string of attacks, from £9,000 tuition fees to the savage education cuts, the scrapping of EMA, soaring cost of living, rising rents. The list could go on, and we've got to keep organising and keep fighting back to try and stop this. So we've only got a few months left till the general election, and it's really, really vital that students' voices are heard in the whole debates that are going to take place around what the next government should do, and we've got to really push a message of defending education. So there's two key ways in which the Student Assembly is going to try and do that over the next period. The first way is just yesterday had a national meeting to decide demands for a Student Manifesto 2015 going into the general election. So basically we're going to be putting forward a list of demands to political parties, MPs, prospective parliamentary candidates ahead of the general election, which will be a focus for campaigning up until May. So basically free education, to making sure that the government provides subsidies and funding for solar panel in every university. These are the kind of demands that we've decided democratically yesterday, and I'm really pleased to say we had representatives from the Young Greens there, the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts, hi guys, the Student Assembly, local groups, NUS Scotland, the NUS Liberation campaigns, the International Students Campaign, NUS, like a really broad coalition has come together to pull together these demands which we'll be campaigning on. And we'll be announcing the next steps soon, but if anyone wants to get involved in that project, then please get in touch with me at the end, and you can join the working group. But if you do follow the Student Assembly online, then you'll see the next steps being announced in the coming weeks. And finally, the other thing we want to do in the run-up to the general election is get on the streets and get our voices heard with our placards and our chanting. So there's two massive demonstrations coming up that the Student Assembly are prioritising. The first one is the Trade Union Congress.
Yeah, that's right.
So, the Trade Union Congress on the 18th of October. We want to have a student block, we want to be really visible, because Britain needs a pay rise, and that includes for all the student workers out there as well. So please get involved in that. And the second one, a month later, plus a day, on the 19th of November, we're organising a national free education demo alongside the Young Greens, the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts, and a really broad coalition, because we need to take the fight to the main political parties on what we think is an alternative. We don't want £9,000 fees, we don't want 6k fees, we don't want £3,000 fees, we want free education. They've got it in Germany, they've got it in most places in Europe. Come on, get with the programme, let's have some free education. Thanks very much for inviting me. I really hope that we can continue working together. Thanks so much to all the Young Greens that have been involved in the Student Assembly to this point. We've made a small difference already in the last 10 months, but I think there's a long road ahead, and we need to end permanent austerity. So I hope you'll be with us every step of the way. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
remember I did introduce myself. I usually forget to introduce myself. What I didn't say, and some of you know and some of you don't know, is that I chair the National People's Assembly alongside the Assistant General Secretary of Unite the Union, Steve Turner. So that meant that when we had our 50,000 strong anti-austerity demo in London in the summer and ended up with our festival in Parliament Square, this green scarf was on the stage introducing Caroline Lucas and making sure that our MP was up there and part of the solution, I suppose, to some of the political arguments that are going on. There are a couple of Labour Party politicians up there as well, but we've got to allow them, some sort of platform, I suppose, to say where they disagree with our own Parliament's line. But I think we've all pretty much had enough of that